Hi everyone, it's Ms. Vasquez here, and today we're going to compare and contrast two texts on the same topic. Now, when we compare, we talk about the way that things are similar or the same. And when we contrast, we show the differences between two things. Now, the differences is how they're not the same. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to look closely at The White House by Lisa Harrington and The House That George Built. And as I'm reading, I'm going to stop to think about some things that are the same and things that are different, and then we're going to put it in our Venn diagram. Now, we can use a Venn diagram to show how things are the same and how things are different. Everything that is different between both texts are going to go in our outer circles. And everything that is the same between texts are going to go right in the middle. Let's start reading. The White House. We're going to start by reading only a few pages from this text, and then we'll move on to a few pages of our next text. Now, before we begin, I noticed that this is an informational text, and an informational text teaches us something. I see real-life photographs. I also see a table of contents. That's going to tell me where to find all the information in the text. The president's home. What is the most famous home in the United States? It is the White House. The president lives and works in the White House. The president's family lives there too. And here it says, the White House is located at 1600 Pennsylvania Ave. Let's keep reading. The White House is a famous symbol. When people see it, they think of the United States and the president. The White House is in Washington, D.C. That's the country's capital. That's the text that I just read. And underneath our text, I see a fun fact. That's something that we might see in informational text. More than 570 buckets of paint were needed to cover the outside of the White House. And over here, it's a diagram. It says, the White House is surrounded by 18 acres of land. That is bigger than 13 football fields. So here, they have a football field and the White House is in the middle, and they're showing how the land is made. White House history. George Washington, our first president, chose the spot for the White House. Architect James Hoban won the contest to build it. In 1792, workers started on the White House. It took 8 years to complete. The walls were made from stone. So here's an old illustration of what the White House looked like, or the architect's work. And it says Hoban's sketch for the White House. And that's who the architect was. Now, we're going to stop reading this text for now, and then we're going to start reading The House That George Built, so that we can compare and contrast our text. The House That George Built. I noticed that this text is already different from our first text because there are drawings and no photographs. Forward. It all began when the American colonists became fed up with their English king. They were sick and tired of outrageous taxes, unfair rules, and occasional temper tantrums. So the 13 colonies fought England for their freedom, and on July 4th, 1776, they found their own country, the United States of America. Now, as you might imagine, this new nation didn't elect a president. They looked high and low for someone trustworthy and brave, someone honest and fair. That someone was George Washington. So here is our illustration, our drawing of George Washington. George had many responsibilities. As the first president, there were laws to pass, important people to meet, and an entire country to run. Although George was the biggest guy in the land, he wanted to create a home where the future presidents would live. So George set out to build a special house that would be the symbol of a great new nation. This is the story of the president's house that George built. First, George looked for the perfect place to put his fine house. He searched the land and discovered the beautiful wooded hills in Maryland. On a hill, George found a lovely spot overlooking the sparkling Potomac River. This is the lot, the grand scenic spot for the president's house that George built. Next, George needed a plan for the president's house. He held a contest and offered $500 for a gold medal to the person with the best design. When the entries started arriving, George got worried. Some drawings were too small and simple for the strong, growing nation. Others were too fussy and frilly for this hard-working new nation. Then George spied a magnificent drawing with majestic columns, grand staircases, and a stately oval room. James Holman's design was right, and he won the contest. This is a design that would stand all of time, that was drawn for the lot, that grand scenic spot for the president's house that George built. And I'm going to stop reading this text right here so that I can show you how we compare and contrast. Now, if you want, you can draw your very own Venn diagram and work with me. If you're going to do that, just pause the video right now. Now, the first book that I'm going to think about is The White House. Now, I want to think about some things that we only saw in our first text. I think that I only saw pieces of an informational text in the White House. So in this text, there's an index. At the end of our text, I know that there's a glossary. That tells us what the words mean. Now, what is something that we can put in the middle that both texts are about? Yeah, both texts are about the White House. They also call it the president's house. And what did we learn about those two things? I noticed that both texts tell us who wanted it or who first started building it, which president, and who made the design. So we learned about James's design, and they both talk about George Washington. Now, I'm going to think about something that we only see in the White House that George built. First, the book only has illustrations. They're only drawings. I don't see any photographs. So I'm going to put drawings and illustrations over here. Now, I'm going to think about any other bit of information that I can include either for the White House or the house that George built. Now, I remember reading in both texts that the United States needed a symbol, and the symbol became the White House. So I'm going to write the word symbol here, because it's a symbol for this nation. Now, we just learned so much in both texts, going through and reading, that so much information was filled in our both section. But I only have a little bit of information that is filled for the White House and the house that George built. Now, the way that we would finish this is we would keep reading both texts and decide what goes here and what goes here. Now, what you can do at home is you can finish filling up this Venn diagram if you remember both texts, or find videos of me reading both texts and fill out this Venn diagram. But if you want, you can also find two books at home that are the same or similar, like books about animals, books about cars, books about anything that you have at home, and you can make your very own Venn diagram and talk about how those things are the same and those are different. But thanks for doing this one with me.